patron Osvaldo asked me to respond to this video.
Did Mary ever sin? Well, Catholics believe that she didn't, and that from her conception she was perfect and sinless, saying that Jesus couldn't have been birthed by a sinner.
Nope. Sorry. Already false start. This is wrong. We've already started on the wrong foot. The Catholic Church does not teach what this person just said. The Catholic Church does not teach that Mary had to be sinless in order for Jesus to be born of Mary. The Catholic Church does not say that. As a matter of fact, the Catholic Church says that it would have been possible for Jesus to have been born from a sinful woman. If God wanted to, he could have created a body for Jesus out of clay like he did Adam. So no, if you're going to make a video critiquing Catholicism, get Catholicism right. There is no excuse, because all you have to do is go to the Catechism and you can see that the Catholic Church does not teach this. So this person has already disqualified himself because he's already gotten this wrong. But let's continue.
The Bible says that there is none righteous, no, not one, and that all have sinned and come short of the glory of God.
Okay, so he quoted Romans 3, which is where Protestants always go to try and disprove the Immaculate Conception, but here's why it doesn't work. St. Paul in Romans 3 is quoting the Old Testament. He's quoting Psalm 14. And guess what? When you go to Psalm 14, and you go to that verse that Paul quotes where he says, none is righteous, no, not one. If you go 2 verses down, 2 verses later, guess what God says? God says that he is with the righteous. Yeah, so in one verse it says, none is righteous, no, not one. And then 2 verses later, God says that he's with the righteous. So if you just go to the original source that Paul is quoting, it actually disproves the conclusion that they arrive at. Because they want to say that Romans 3 proves that everyone, including Mary, is not righteous. Even though the Bible explicitly says that there are many who are righteous. Not just Mary, but other people in the New Testament that are called righteous. In the Old Testament as well, many people are called righteous. So it's not absolute. Same thing with the other passage from Romans that he quoted where Paul says that all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. The question here is this all absolute or is it general? Well, when you read it in context, you'll know that it is general and it's not absolute, because he's talking about Jews and Gentiles in general, not absolutely each and every single person. And we know that the word all in the Bible isn't always used absolutely or literally. For example, if you go to Mark chapter 1 verse 5, it says this: there went out to him, talking about John the Baptist, all the country of Judea and all the people of Jerusalem, and they were baptized by him in the river Jordan, confessing their sins. So right here, the word all is used twice in Mark 1:5. So according to you, according to the Protestant position, if you're being literal here, they want to say that all in Romans 3 is literal. Are you going to say that in Mark 1:5, the entire country of Judea and every single person in the city of Israel, every single person in Israel went to go get baptized all at the same time by John the Baptist? No, absolutely not. Because we see that there are plenty of people in Judea and in Israel that were not baptized by John the Baptist and that did not follow Jesus. So what that means is that all is not absolute, all is not literal, all is usually used in a general sense. So what that means is that there can be exceptions to what is said in Romans 3. And it turns out that there are. We know that one exception for sure is Jesus, right? We know that Jesus would be an exception to Romans 3, even though Jesus isn't singled out as an exception to Romans 3 in Romans 3. But we also know that we can single out Mary as well as an exception, because we can actually go back to the Old Testament, and the Old Testament tells us that Mary and Jesus are coupled together as an exception of being touched by the devil or by sin. If you go to Genesis 3:15, which is the Proto-Evangelium, Genesis 3:15 says this. It says, I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel. So the him, the his being referred to here is Jesus. He's the one who crushes the head of the serpent. And who is the her? It is the mother who brings forth her seed. And by the way, it's interesting that it's worded that way, because women, the female, does not provide the seed. The seed is provided by the man. But here it says her seed, even though women don't produce seed. So it's talking about Mary, who produced seed that didn't come from herself, because Jesus is the Son of God. So it's saying that Mary and Jesus have enmity with the devil, with the serpent, with the enemy. Meaning that Jesus and Mary are over here and the devil is over here, and they cannot touch. The devil cannot corrupt the woman and the seed of the woman. And the woman is Mary, and the seed of the woman is Jesus. So Genesis 3:15 actually prophesies Mary's sinlessness. And we also see it in the New Testament in the Gospel of Luke, in Luke chapter 1, when the angel appears to Mary to tell her that she's going to be the mother of Jesus. He says, "Hail, full of grace." That's how he greets her when he appears to her. Well, that phrase, full of grace, it says it all, because if Mary is full of grace, and by the way, in the Greek, it's kikeritomene, that is a past perfect participle. If you were to translate it directly and literally, it would be, "Hail, having been perfectly graced for all time," is literally what it would mean if you translate it roughly. What that means is that Mary was already fully graced or perfectly graced when the angel had appeared to her, even before Jesus was conceived in her womb. So the angel recognized that Mary was full of grace, and if you're full of grace, you do not sin. You are not touched by sin if you are full of grace. To be full of grace means that you are sinless. So Mary was already sinless when the angel appeared to her. Why? Because we only know that grace comes from God. Divine, supernatural grace can only come from God. And that's why the Catholic Church teaches that it was God who created Mary without sin and kept Mary from sinning. And we know that God can do that because the New Testament also tells us this. In the Epistle of St. Jude, verse 28, it says that God can keep you from falling into sin. So the Bible says that God can create human beings without sin, and we know that he did that with Adam and Eve, right? I'm sure that this person would say, yeah, Adam and Eve were created without sin. And the Bible also says that God can keep you from sinning. So why is it so hard to believe that God could have created Mary without sin and kept her from sinning? Because Genesis 3:15 tells us, prophesies it, and then the angel that appeared to Mary mentions it again in the greeting that he gives Mary. And when you consider that Mary is the Ark of the New Covenant because she carried Jesus inside of her, and we go back to the Old Testament and see how the Ark of the New Covenant had to be perfect, how it had to be incorruptible, made from incorruptible wood, then how much more so would the Ark of the New Covenant have to be incorruptible according to the will of God? And again, we're not saying that Mary had to be without sin so that Jesus could be born. No, we're saying that Mary was without sin because that was part of God's plan to save us. God wanted Jesus to be born from a sinless woman because he wanted a woman to participate in our salvation in the same way that a woman, Eve, participated in our fall. So this is all completely biblical.
But the Bible says that there is none righteous, no, not one, and that all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. And nowhere does the Bible suggest that Mary was an exception to this rule. But could Jesus have been born through a sinner?
Yes, and the Catholic Church says, yes, he could have.
I see no problem with that reality. Jesus was born into a sinful world, and there's no reason why he couldn't have been born to a sinner. The Immaculate Conception is a false teaching that's not supported by the Bible.
Well, I just proved how the Immaculate Conception is supported by the Bible, and the irony here is that he didn't even get the Immaculate Conception right. So again, Protestants, if you're going to make videos critiquing Catholicism, you actually have to know what Catholicism teaches. So Osvaldo, thank you very much for having me respond to this clip. And if there's any clip that you want me to respond to, go to patreon.com/voice of reason. And if you send it to me on there, I will respond.